Welcome back to Surviving in the Wild. In this episode, we're going to be talking all about neurodiversity. We're going to have Becky and we're going to have Ben. They're not here yet, but we're going to talk all about things like ADHD, Autism, ASD, and all the things that you might want to do to maybe help yourself understand a little bit more about them. If you don't want to listen to me, listen to them, that's absolutely okay. That's why we've got the link below where you can find out different support and services and more information that you can trust in your area. But other than that, enjoy the episode.
Yeah, or pizza. Especially
We used to do Pizza Hut Challenge, which was, do you remember that, when it was like the buffet at lunch? And you had to see how many slices you could manage. Because it was like $5.99, wasn't it, for the unlimited buffet?
Yeah.
How old are you, Ben?
34.
Yeah, I was just trying to work out inflation then, because it was like $9.99 when I went for it, and that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
How old are you?
27.
Well, there you go. That's inflation.
7 years of inflation. £4 of Pizza Hut buffet. We're not judging things in Freddo's anymore, but Pizza Hut buffet. If you are looking for support and you don't want to watch the whole video, then that is completely okay. The whole point of this is to get young people to find support within their area and understand what else they can do to support their mental health. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about neurodiversity and managing and other parts of mental health as well. So whatever you are going through, whether you're struggling with your mental health, whether you have a label, whether you don't have a label, whatever it might be that is going on in your life, you deserve to get support. And that's why we're doing this project. And that's all it's all about. And that's what all about surviving in the wild. And today on the video, I'm such a fidgeter. So I don't know how I'm going to sit in the whole of this now.
You don't look very comfortable.
Do you know what? This is actually quite comfortable. I'm going to be fidgeting no matter what. But today on the podcast, on the video, on the YouTube video, I feel like such a YouTuber. We've got Ben and we've got Becky.
Hi.
And they are a little bit more expertise than I do in the field that we're going to talk about today. Guys, I'm just going to introduce. What do you guys do? Who wants to go first? Ben, what do you do?
So I work in Orca House CAMHS, which is a community mental health setting, and I work on the ADHD sort of pathway, like side, where we do sort of ADHD assessments. We do, and that's basically it.
So when you say like a pathway, what does that mean?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure. No, so pathway is sort of, I suppose, a journey along a path. So where you sort of initially make access our service. Mm-hmm. And then I suppose, unfortunately, there's sort of a bit of a wait on that. So it's probably quite a long path to sort of then get your sort of a decision on if you sort of get if you have ADHD or not. In my case,
and that's going to be something we'll talk about a little bit later on in terms of diagnosis and different stuff as well. Becky, what do you do? How's your role differ?
Yeah, so I work in the same place as Ben, so we work for the Children's and Young People's Mental Health Service. I'm on what we call neurodiverse pathways in the service, but I'm more on the autism side. So we have two sides. So we have an ADHD team and an autism team. So in terms of autism, we carry out the assessments for autism. And then once the assessment is completed, we signpost children and families to the appropriate support within the city. The other kind of side to our service is obviously the mental health side as well. So I work a lot with the mental health clinicians who are supporting young people who either are awaiting a diagnosis of autism or have a diagnosis of autism, just to help support really that thinking in terms of how we can adapt and understand their mental health differences, taking into account their autism alongside it. Okay,
because we're going to look at that in the start of the episode as well, in terms of like how autism, ADHD, mental health, how they intertwine. There we go. I've overlapped two words that mean overlap. Well done, me. So we're going to then understand kind of what your services do, but also just kind of get down to the nuts and bolts really of what are they? What is someone struggling with? What do you guys... So I know what I want to get out of this video. What do you guys want to get out of this video? What is the purpose for you? What would you want to young people, after, or parents, or anyone that supports them, to understand at the end of this video?
I suppose it's just understanding a little bit more around neurodiversity, what it is. I know a lot of children and families, because I suppose when we work in it, it's our day-to-day, so we have a good understanding. But actually, for a lot of children and parents, by the time they come to us, or when they first come to us, you know, it's the first time they've ever encountered neurodiversity or the words ADHD or autism. So there's a lot of kind of fear and worry around it, and obviously there's a lot of misinformation as well. I mean, it's really great that these days ADHD and autism is more well known. But I think with that, we've also got to be careful that we're spreading the right information to children and families so that they can understand what it is that they may be experiencing and dispel some of these worries and fears.
And try and focus on some of the positives. I think I suppose when we do ADHD or autism assessments, you might look at some of the things people might struggle with, but I suppose in look at it from the other angle is that as well. I think it's quite important to sort of focus on strengths that sort of come with neurodiversity, as well as acknowledging some of the things that people find difficult. But I think that there is that sort of from everyone, I suppose, because you look, you know, when you do the assessments, you look at what people might struggle with, but you know, I suppose I could do a whole nother assessment about what, you know, makes, you know, someone with neurodiversity so special and unique, and have this other set of abilities which sort of you know, the neurotypical, you know, people without ADHD and autism sort of might not have. And
that's something that's probably we're going to talk about as well, like around like environments and different stuff. And like I know for a lot of young people, which we may come on to, around like education environments and the structure and stuff, actually sometimes doesn't allow people to kind of flourish in that environment. When I know for me personally, like for anyone who hasn't watched any of the other videos far, I'm just Chris, who has lived experience of mental health issues, but like even like the school environment was really, really tough for me, but I did fairly well in school. But even like the structure, I just wanted to sometimes just get up, like move about, and make sure and have a bit of a break. Okay, so I mean, you guys have pretty much nailed what I wanted to kind of cover in terms of the purpose of the video, because the whole point of this for us is understanding. Actually, can we dispel some of that misinformation? Can we help people understand a little bit better about neurodiversity and what comes along with it? If you're watching this video now, like, or you've seen a clip on it on social media, we're never going to get down to every bit of detail around understanding the human brain within 30 minutes, 40 minutes of a YouTube video.
We don't know anyway. We're still developing that understanding, you know, and I think that that's the journey that we're all going on with sort of people accessing services and people that are sort of delivering those services too. I believe we're at the dawn of a new understanding of neurodiversity, and I think with that, we're all learning, and you know, and I think that social media has been a really powerful and positive tool for helping people understand some of the things they might struggle with, also creating communities in social media, and so there's other neurodiverse people and they don't feel alone. And I think with that, in that more understanding, I think that's people have got, it's helping them understand themselves too.
There is that massive element, isn't there, of like that lived experience of it can be good, and it can reduce some of the stigma around what somebody might be like going through, and like actually raise awareness of it. I guess it's just how do we make it the right awareness and make it like make sure people are getting the right information. And at the end of the day, like the whole point of this video, linking back to where you can find some support like about it. Go on then. From what you were saying then, Ben, how do we understand neurodiversity? What is neurodiversity? So somebody might be watching this and go, I have no idea what they're all on about.
Well, in terms of ADHD, I'll talk about, and then Becky maybe talk about the autism side. So, neurodiversity, they're all human traits, you know. So there's sort of three areas you tend to look at, which is inattention, which is sort of our concentration, you know, levels, you know, around that. It's the hyperactivity, So sort of what we like sitting still or not so good at, and inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity, which is, I suppose, when we might do things or say things without thinking. And we can all know those things. They're human traits. And so I suppose... we can all be inattentive. We can all, have a short attention span to things, etc.
Yeah.
So I suppose but with neurodiversity, it's maybe, and I don't think we know exactly where that line is, but it's where those human traits become enough of an issue, I suppose, or problematic in day-to-day living to sort of, to warrant you to be sort of neurodiverse.
Makes sense.
And I think the word neurodiversity, neuro relates to the brain, diversity relates to differences. So it's brain differences. It's the way in which the brain works is different. And when we think about kind of early human, prehistoric times, we had we needed different types of people in our society. So we needed the hunters and the gatherers to go get the food. We needed people that were able to be more like homemakers and build the fires and build houses.
Paint the caves.
Yeah. We needed people that were storytellers to be able to entertain us as a society. We need people with different strengths, different traits, to be able to create this diverse society, and I think that is neurodiversity relates to a way in which the brain works, which is maybe has different strengths and different difficulties. So ADHD, for example, is kind of a neurodiversity. Autism is a neurodiversity. They both have different kind of strengths within that, different difficulties within that. So, for example, somebody with ADHD is very kind of that hyperactivity, impulsivity. They're the ones that, if we were to go back to prehistoric times, they would have been the hunter-gatherers. They would have been the ones that were going out and collecting the food and finding new places to live and exploring, because that's what we needed. Autism, the traits tend to be more around ability to see kind of patterns in things and recognize sequences in things. They like order, predictability. They're very kind of logical thinkers, and we need people like that in society as well. So it relates to kind of the different ways in which the brain works in terms of different people and different personalities, really.
In that case, do we think... This is such a wider question than I probably mean to ask in this, because we could be here for 3 days. But, do you think then the structures and systems that we currently sort of live under is the why people who may have a diagnosis or may not have a diagnosis may struggle with said things then? So you're saying, we needed different people in society. If we look at the way society is made up, we actually are quite... The way that, education's set up, we're quite narrow in terms of where we're pushing people into. Is that... Am I wrong to say that? I don't know.
I think 1,000,000%. I think that's definitely the case. And, if you look at a school environment, I suppose, and school rules or whatever, is that you sort of have to maybe sit still, pay attention for a certain amount of time, be on time, and all of these sort of rules are maybe at sometimes quite difficult for a young person with ADHD to sort of, or autism, to sort of adhere to. But then I always say that you put a neurodiverse person in a different environment, this is where what can become a struggle becomes a superpower. And more often than not, you'll go off to through them thrive in that different environment.
Okay, how does then, help me understand then, how does sort of neurodiversity differ to say personality then? So this is obviously quite hard, because there's nuances, and like you said, we're still trying to understand different parts of the brain, and we're not going to understand everything. But how does it differ?
So that's a really, really good question, to be fair. I think neurodiversity relates to kind of strengths within the brain, differences within the brain, different traits that you may have. Your personality basically is who you are in terms of your characteristics and your values and your beliefs and how you relate to yourself and how you relate to the world. They're very, very different. So you can have, so in terms of ADHD and autism, you have this very kind of set symptomology in terms of traits. So for autism, you are looking at those traits within difficulties in eye contact and friendships and understanding emotions and communication, having a high level of preoccupation and need for routine and sensory differences. So if you are autistic, all autistic people will have some kind of combination of the different symptomology of autism, but personality is very much unique to you. It's who you are. My personality wouldn't necessarily then be the same as somebody else's.
Like, for example, because I like playing cricket and have a strong kind of value driven in terms of when it comes to sort of trust and honesty. That isn't based in sort of neurodiversity, but that's based in my personality. Sort of stuff.
So it's who you are.
I suppose they're totally different things, but then I suppose they might have a bit of an overlap as well, if that makes any sense.
How do we look at it then because that in itself, like somebody who might be maybe struggling to manage aspects of their ADHD or their autism or whatever neurodiversity, if they're struggling with that, and this is not to if somebody says, "Oh, we're all neurodiverse," would that become quite annoying for somebody to hear that? Because it's like, actually, no, this is something that a clever clinician like you guys has diagnosed or whatever with. How do we kind of understand that then?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because a diagnosis of something is a really personal decision, and I think when we're looking at diagnoses, I think you've got to be really careful in not getting kind of too tied up in it.
Okay.
Because as Ben was saying, we're all different, we all have different characteristics. It's really hard when you're young in terms of the systems that we have, but when you get older, if you think of the amount of diverse people in the world, we have comedians, we have artists, we have people working in banking, we have, we need all those
fantastic charity workers.
Yeah, exactly. We need
joker ones.
but we need all those different people, and I think what a diagnosis can give is a way to understand yourself. And what we often find is that the people who come seeking that diagnosis is usually because it's impacting on their own quality of life in some way, shape or form. And so they're seeking to understand why I think and feel the way I do. And that diagnosis can really give an answer to that, to say, actually, you're struggling with this, or this is really difficult because this is the way in which your brain works. So it can be really helpful and can be really powerful to help understand why you might struggle with certain things. And I think coming back to an earlier question as well, I think in terms of a society, and particularly probably the dark side of social media, it can often be projected that we need to be a certain way. So I think social media in particular, kind of young people watch these videos and they think, I've got to be out partying, I've got to be a social
Well, not
person.
even young people. Anyone who's on social media too much. But I guess
I need to do this, X, Y, and Z.
Got to take a photo of my meal and share it because it's a good one, or...
Yeah.
I haven't had one of them in a while.
But I think there's a lot of pressure in society to be a certain way, and I think what we're trying to do with these diagnoses is almost give people permission to go, it's okay to be a little bit different. It's okay to not be that way. So, particularly if you're an autistic person, socialising can be quite exhausting for you. And I know that a lot of autistic people like to have set routines, do things in the same ways. They may have a very small, select group of people they're friends with. They might not go out partying, or they might go out partying, we don't know. But what we're trying to do is trying to say, look, that's okay.
Yeah, literally.
To be you don't have to be like these other people.
I had a really good chat with a lad who came on the podcast the other week, and he was like, I wanted to go out he has autism, and he was like, I want to go out with my tennis friends and go out like to the pub and go out clubbing and stuff, and he was like, I just want to do it once just to see what it's like. and he was like, and he went once, he was like, I was there for 10 minutes, didn't like it, and I was like, that's completely fine. I'm 27. Even now, like, I don't want to go out, like, and so it's, and I guess it's and I guess that is the understanding limitations of what you want to do and how that interacts with what you actually do.
And then it's focusing on those strengths, and it's like, and what you enjoy and what makes you happy, and that's totally different, thankfully, for everyone. If it wasn't, we'd all go to do the same thing, and and that's and what a boring world that would be. I think this is we've got to celebrate that difference, we've got to encourage that difference, we've got to accept that difference, and and then hopefully in doing that, then that will help the individual be at one with their difference, because we're all different, absolutely, we're all different.
When it comes to then, is it like, are ADHD and autism, are they mental health conditions?
No.
So but can we sit, why is it then in why does it sit in CAMHS?
Great question.
It is a good question. It comes down to the way that services are basically commissioned in your area.
Okay.
So in a lot of areas throughout the country, neurodiverse conditions are diagnosed by paediatrics in the main hospital. It just so happens that in this area, Tees Escombe Ware Valley NHS Trust are commissioned to provide the assessment and subsequent treatment for ADHD and autism within the CAMHS service. But within our service itself, we are divided in terms of, like Ben was saying earlier, those pathways. So we have our mental health pathway, and then we have the neurodiverse side of the service.
In that case, then, so I'll flip it a different way. Do people who have autism or ADHD, are they more likely to struggle with their mental health? Is there almost a susceptibility to it?
Unfortunately, yes. I think going back to what we were saying earlier about sort of maybe certain things like school being challenging, for example, and having those different challenges. And I always think with young people, unlike adults, is they sort of there's a bit more. There's that expectation to sort of do certain things, and when you become an adult, you can thankfully do what you want. I suppose there is that, I hate this term comorbidity, but there's that, I suppose that being neurodiverse can impact your mental health, being a young person or an adult. And statistically,
and comorbidity is
so something which comes with another thing. Is that right? Do you think, Becky?
Yeah. So comorbidity relates to when you have an identified diagnosis of two things.
Right,
so you can have diagnosis for ADHD and depression, or autism and anxiety.
Yeah.
So there's kind of two conditions that you have, rather than just the one.
But having potentially a neurodiversity doesn't mean that you'll necessarily struggle with your mental health.
No, not at all. So it's not a prerequisite, to say that you will get mental health, develop mental health differences. I think what we're trying to say is that by the very nature of these differences, it can it can lead to those vulnerabilities, you know.
Okay.
So in terms of autism, you know, when we think of teenagers, it's a very social time, isn't it? It's a time where you're trying to discover yourself and navigate friendships, and going to school. Schools are very big and busy environments. There's lots of demands, and we know that when you're autistic, actually those things are really difficult. You know, developing friendships, the demands on you, the sensory environment, all those things are really, really hard, so that can make you more vulnerable to becoming more anxious or struggling more. And equally, you know, with ADHD, my husband actually has a diagnosis of autism and ADHD, and my son has autism. And he often says, you know, like, he really, really struggled in school, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying, he really struggled with his mental health in the past, just because of the kind of very nature of ADHD and that difficulties that can come with it. And he actually got diagnosed he's 45 and he only got diagnosed 3 years ago. And the diagnosis was absolutely life-changing, because it enabled him to understand why he's always struggled with organisation, planning, impulsivity. You know, he left school with absolutely not a single qualification to his name at all, because school was such a difficult environment for him. And then he went back to college later on at the age of 19, and then he started working for the NHS as a healthcare assistant, and then the NHS put him through his nurse training, and now he's, you know, an advanced mental health nurse in dementia care.
And that's so important, I think, that message, because we all learn at different times in our life, you know, and although school is, you know, can be is an important tool, but we do learn. And, you know, I started my nursing at 30, having done something else before. And, so I think in accepting, you know, with ADHD and autism, that school can be a tricky place, and, you know, and the rules which are in place, which might not be sort of so helpful for a young person with, for example, ADHD, is sort of, you know, sitting still as expected, you know, putting your hand up in class, you know, getting on time for your lesson,
norms.
and in fact, you know, lots of these being late or not being organised or forgetting your planner, or, you know, or shouting out the answer, you know, or saying something without thinking and getting in trouble for it, but not meaning to. This comes from your neurodiversity, but they're getting in trouble for it. I think that then can impact people's mental health, and that's sometimes, I think, one of the things that goes on for young people in school.
There's those different things there, isn't there? It's like, bring it back to sort of like the impact of, I don't know. So somebody was saying to me the other day, how the hell do you make friends in your 20s if you don't drink? Like, and that environment of a pub or a club which might be very busy, and in which you're socialising around alcohol, would be really, really tricky for somebody who doesn't like them sort of environments. And I guess it would even take away the alcohol. The school is exactly the same, that busy environment that actually, if you can't be connecting with others, if you can't be like, feel like you can go to things or making friends in a certain way, and then you feel left out, your self-esteem gets hit, that's the impact on your mental health, isn't it? That, like...
Yeah.
Thankfully, we've got technology now, I think, which sort of gets round lots of those problems. So, for example, if you're a gamer, you know, that you create those meaningful connections online, friendships, relationships at time, you know, and, you know, again, I suppose with sort of dating apps and stuff like that, you don't have to put yourself out there and sort of, you know, I was always terrible at it, and you can ask my partner about that, but, you know, have a small talk and stuff, and luckily, I suppose there's different ways in which we can interact with the world and other people with like technology, and I think that's really positive.
Yeah, and I always say to my young people, it's about finding your tribe. You know, it's about finding those people out there that you connect to, that you can relate to, because they are out there, absolutely. You know, if you're the type of person who, you know, likes to go to a library and play D&D, or, you know, prefers to kind of just sit and do quiet quiet things. There will be other people out there who are similar to you. You know, go out and find them.
And I guess it's just that stepping stone. It's the hard thing when you are younger, and like it's going to do them things is really tricky. And I guess it's doing it in that way that's also safe. Like, I mean, with current streaming services, and there was a recent program, wasn't there, that came out around like safety online and different stuff. I guess just doing it in the right way. If we're talking about almost susceptibility, almost that prerequisite sort of stuff, it's really important to understand that people need that support, whether or not they do have a diagnosis or not. Why might then somebody actually want to pursue a diagnosis? Is it come back to that stuff around validating how you feel, or like what?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about understanding why you think and feel the way you do. I think I've often encountered a lot of young people where before the diagnosis, you know, they'll often say, you know, well, I'm just weird, I'm not normal, I'm
naughty if I've got ADHD,
I've got serious mental health issues. And actually, it's none of those things. And I think what it does is it just enables you to validate how you're feeling, understand why you think and feel the way you do. And not just for you, but for your family and friends as well, and for the other people around you. You know, for your parents to understand that actually you do these things because that is how your brain works. And if we can lean into that, we can really unlock a lot of real potential, you know.
I think with ADHD, I think it's exactly the same, that it's in that understanding of why you might struggle with certain things and be good at certain things. I think that's a really, really powerful thing. You know, it was really powerful for your husband to sort of work, I wasn't just disorganised, you know, and wasn't just not bothered or whatever it might be.
Does it help almost having like to focus what it is that you kind of concentrate on when it comes to almost managing that mental health side of things? Then does it help kind of guide in that way?
Yeah, I think it does. You know, actually had this conversation just yesterday with a family, because you might feel really low or you might be struggling with anxiety, but there'll be lots of different underlying reasons as to why that is and what's driving that. So the symptoms of low mood and anxiety may look like the same, but the underlying reasons of what's driving that can be very, very different for everybody. And so being able to understand your neurodiversity helps us to unlock why you might be thinking and feeling or experiencing those mental health differences the way that you do, or what might be impacting that, really. I worked with a young person before where they were really, really struggling with their mental health, you know, really anxious, really depressed, really isolating themselves at home, not going out, not seeing anyone. And actually, when we kind of unpicked it, he had quite a lot of autistic traits, and he's always has done, even from a young age. So when we're able to really explore that and then really explore what autism is, and he could really relate to it and go, oh my gosh, yeah, that's how I think, that's how I feel, yes, I can absolutely relate to that. And then once we were able to then confirm that, we were able to lean into it, and he was able to embrace the fact that actually, I like routine, I like predictability. Actually, no, I just want to go to that same shop every day and have the same meal every day, or, you know, I do find conversations quite stressful, and actually, no, I'm all right with just, you know, maybe a couple of friends. He was started to be able to embrace who he was rather than trying to fight against it.
And focus on those strengths.
Yeah.
And I think that's just always so really important. And I think that with neurodiversity, as like I said before, when we assess for neurodiversity, I suppose it's looking at what, you know, the impact it can have on someone's daily life, which sort of might lead them to seek a diagnosis.
Yeah.
But really,
I guess that's what thing we have to always come back to, is that it's that impact on the daily life, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think you touched on it earlier, Ben. You know, with autism, there isn't necessarily a treatment or a therapy. There's nothing to therapize. You know.
Well, then that's the question I was going to ask. Is the way that, in terms of nothing to therapize, is that a word? I don't know.
can be today.
It will be.
I've just made it up.
Yeah, we'll go with it. is the way that, okay, pre and post sort of diagnosis then, is the way that you manage with your mental health or your neurodiversity going to be the same?
So I think, particularly in terms of autism, it's just understanding that this is the way in which your brain works. These are your strengths. These can be the difficulties. And the more that you can learn about autism, the more that you can understand autism, the more you will understand yourself in terms of why you might struggle with certain things, what that might be about, and the more that then you can lean into that. You know, if you know that your brain just isn't that great at picking up on the social cues, it just isn't that great at understanding emotions, then you can own that. You know, you know what, I'm not so great at that. So then you can communicate that to your family and your friends.
Yeah,
and
other people around you. And so
you're gonna have to be
my
a bit
friend's
more
not always late to come and see me because, you know, with ADHD, because they doesn't care about me, or, you know, or is you know, it's because they're not very good at timekeeping, or, you know, or parents getting annoyed, you know, he's not forgetting, or she's not forgetting, or they're not forgetting their sort of PE kit every morning, you know, or whenever it needed to sort of annoy me. It's just because it's just they've got other things going on in their mind, you know, they've maybe got that
distracted.
You know, they're just easily distracted, you know.
And if we go back at what you were saying before, is that then if we are, I don't know, if structures and systems then tell us that we're almost bad if we do forget our PE kit or are late somewhere, then obviously we're going to feel a bit rubbish about ourselves.
And also something we call executive functioning, but I suppose that's quite an important thing to bring up, which is essentially you might have to, if you've got ADHD or autism, work harder at, you know, remembering things for school, or might have to work harder at sort of going into a busy environment, and you know, and I suppose when you're doing all of that extra stuff, you know, that make that extra effort, it's tiring, and, you know, and then that can sort of impact on, you know, a young person or adult, you know, with neurodiversity.
Yeah, and I think one of the words that kind of comes up quite a lot around neurodiversity is masking. You know,
literally what I was just thinking. That I was just about to say that.
Yeah, and masking relates to trying to hide these traits, trying to be what you think society needs you to be, and that's incredibly stressful and it's incredibly exhausting. So when we talk about unmasking in neurodiversity, what we're talking about is embracing those neurodiverse traits. So for autism, I suppose autism and ADHD, one of the things that's really common is management of emotions, because we know that in ADHD people feel emotions so much more acutely and sensitively, and it's similar in autism. So it's about being able to acknowledge that and go, you know what, I feel more acutely, so I am going to maybe get a bit upset a bit more, or I'm going to need support if I'm feeling quite worried or quite anxious about something. In autism, you know, because you know, change and unpredictability is so difficult, it's recognizing that I need other people around me to warn me if something's going to change, or walk me through it, or talk to me about it. And I think that's what unmasking is. Unmasking is about owning who you are, and it's about owning these traits and going, you know what, this is what I'm really struggling with, this is what I'm really good at, this is what I need people to know about me, and this is what I need other people to do to help me adapt to things. But it's having that confidence to own it, and I think that's where this awareness comes in, and that positivity about neurodiversity, and educating not just young people but educating families and friends and teachers and everybody, so that we know and understand it.
I couldn't agree more. I was just going on.
And we're still all working on that. Us as professionals and the whole of society, and on social media, you know, and that's probably where this information comes from. We are still always in mental health, you know, developing our understanding, and, you know, and I think that we're all on that journey, and I think, but with that greater understanding is gonna come for bring about better benefits for the neurodiverse communities. Because it's that teachers maybe understand, friends understand, family understand, and in understanding, I think, and we've mentioned a lot about understanding today, I think that's potentially one of the most powerful tools for everybody, for the individual and for the people around them, to understand, about neurodiversity.
Absolutely.
Which is maybe why we're here today, is it?
Maybe. It might be a little bit of a...
Yeah.
That was such a positive note. I'm now going to flip it.
Okay.
Is there a danger of things like self-diagnosis around ADHD and autism, or is there a danger around it depending on your sources of information?
Is there a danger in it?
Is danger the wrong word? Is there a... I'm just kind of like thinking, is that because obviously it's very prominent in the news, in the media at the minute around diagnosis and different stuff around neurodiversity. I mentioned it before we actually started the recording, is that I personally wouldn't, it's the old NHS website thing. If you Google your symptoms, then you end up dropping a microphone. If you Google your symptoms, then you go, oh no, it means I have this, and this. Is this
I think even more so, I'd say, because not everyone always goes around with a headache. Do you know what I mean? I suppose, but everyone goes around with human traits, and that's what neurodiversity, they call it spectrum, but I'm not sure that's the right thing. But I suppose that, we all have a social battery, maybe related to autism, and, or we can all feel a bit overwhelmed in certain situations. We can all be bad at timekeeping sometimes. We could all have an attention span. And I suppose so we can all identify, therefore, with at times when we struggle with it, can't we?
I think for me, personally, I would like to see the breakdown of this very medicalised model. I think it's different for ADHD because there is a medication to treat ADHD, so you kind of have to have that line almost, so that you're not medicating unnecessarily. But in terms of autism, for me, I sometimes struggle with having this diagnostic criteria, if I'm really honest, because you know yourself the most. And there's no greater expert in terms of how you think and how you feel and how you perceive the world than yourself. So if you are reading these symptoms and you're going, oh my gosh, I can relate to that makes sense, I feel like it's written about me, and then because of that you go ahead and then embrace who you are, you put in place some adaptations, you communicate it with your family and friends, and that makes your life better and easier, and you feel so much more complete by doing that, then I cannot see the danger in that at all, particularly for autism.
I guess I think where I'm trying to go with it is in the sense that I just don't want anyone to watch a 30-second video and see one trait of someone's human behaviour, of lived experience of something, and then almost self-diagnosed because of that. I guess, or because we were saying before, there is misinformation about if you sleep in a certain way, or you do certain actions, or you do certain things that then you have. And because then that just worries me. Then it then does undermine the people that then do struggle with things every day with it.
But this is the thing, I suppose. It always comes back, I suppose, to what people struggle with, and we all struggle with different stuff in life. And whether that means you're neurodiverse or not, it doesn't. I suppose. Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, for autism, if you were to in York, for example, as an adult, if you were to refer yourself for assessment, there is a self-diagnostic screening tool you can complete, which has lots of different symptomology of autism. So, as we said, these are human traits, so everybody will have some of these traits, but the difference between just having some of these traits and having the kind of meeting that diagnostic threshold, if you like, for autism, is that you have enough of these traits collectively that impact in your life, and there is a kind of a self-diagnostic screening tool that helps you decide that. So when you go through, then it'll give you feedback in terms of actually, yes, there is enough traits that you've identified that would fit under that spectrum. So there are NHS tools. I wouldn't be going off grid and using other tools. There are very specific NHS tools, and in children's care we have what we call screening forms that we send out to parents and schools as well, that look at all these traits, and we look for a certain level and combination of those traits to say actually you are probably meeting that diagnostic threshold. So I would say that if you're sat there thinking, oh my gosh, I think this is me, then I would approach the NHS and use the NHS screening tools to help you decide. I think there are similar screening tools for ADHD as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, it's really hard, isn't it? Because I think that, you know, with a diagnosis, which is, I think, a question you're going to ask, but, you know, having a diagnosis, I suppose, helps people understand things that they struggle with, and then in understanding what they might struggle with, then they can also accept some of those things and then focus on their strengths. And I think, you know, and it's really
some
difficult
of the things
because,
they might struggle
in
with.
fact, and I just think if a self-diagnosis, you know, helps someone, I personally, I don't think this is an official NHS line, but you know, maybe it is. I don't see a problem with that. You know, and then
I agree.
you know, and we can all, you know, it's and we all have different needs, and different needs you don't need a diagnosis to have different needs, do you? You know, like you can be, you know, neurotypical and have mental health problems. You can be neurodiverse, have mental health problems. You can sort of, you know, not have ADHD and be rubbish with organisation. You can have ADHD and probably not to be too bad or quite organised. It's difficult. I suppose it's always looking at it, you know, what impact is that having.
I guess this is why why I said right at the top of this video is that we're never going to completely understand what it is, who we are, from a half an hour video or a 30-second video on TikTok, Instagram or YouTube. And no matter who you are and whatever it might be you're struggling with, if something helps you, like you said, it helps you. But understanding actually that we're all going to manage in different ways and we're going to have different strengths, but not undermining the people that do have a diagnosis and actually do struggle with these things every day. And I think that's really important to understand when it comes to it, is that this is complicated, and at the end of this video, if you are watching it and going, oh, okay, that's why it's really important for us to link back to the right resources, the right information, the right services, because whether you do have that label or you don't have that label, you think they have that label or you don't, think you deserve to understand where you can get support and how to manage it yourself.
And
there's one fact though, isn't there, amongst all this, which is that, you know, in recent years, people seeking a diagnosis has increased in younger population and an adult population, and there's loads of theories flying about why that is. I think it's surely this is just about an increased understanding, you know. Why young people and adults are seeking a diagnosis is that increased understanding of neurodiversity, what it means, and you know, and it affects different people in different ways. And you know, for example, girls with ADHD, you have to fact check the statistic, but I believe it's 70% of girls get diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood. You know, and so and it affects different people in different ways, and do you know, and you know, for example, if you have ADHD, you might have a poorer sense of danger, which is brilliant if you want to be someone like Guy Martin, who I think has ADHD. Again, fact check that. You know, who's the
Thanks, Ben. I'm going to
sorry, but who's the motorcycle? You know, and it's, I suppose they've looked focused on their strengths, haven't they? And it brings about strengths. So we are still all, I think, on a journey of understanding more, and I think on that journey it's really important to make sure that you're looking in the right place at that information, and I think that, you know, that as you know, an NHS service, as NHS, you know, we are still developing our understanding of, you know, different, you know, ADHD and how it affects different populations, and I think that things are going to change, and I think that with that change and that different information, it's about, even I think that makes it even more important to make sure you're sort of looking in the right places for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, kind of picking up on what you said earlier as well, Ben, it's about looking at, because I think sometimes we can get so caught up in diagnosis as well, you know, and a lot of people think, oh, I can't do anything because I haven't been diagnosed. You know, that's simply not true, you know, and particularly for autism, you know, all the adaptations for autism, they're not going to harm to implement them with or without diagnosis. Either they'll help you or they won't. You know, it's a similar thing for ADHD. You know, there's a lot of psychosocial interventions that you can put in place for ADHD. If you know that, you know, you're not great at timekeeping or you're not great at organisation, you can put in place those tools to help you with those things. You know, we often have a lot of families that say to us, we can't do anything without diagnosis. Schools saying we can't do anything without diagnosis. You can. There's lots of things you can do. Don't be afraid to go out there, read about it, learn about it, and if there's a strategy that you come across thinking, actually, that'll really help me, you know,
put it in place, give it a go.
Because all support needs to be based upon need, not a diagnosis. Absolutely. You know, and you know, and just think, well, I haven't got a diagnosis of ADHD, so I'm not gonna have visual reminders to help me remind stuff, or I'm not going to have
get your post-it notes out on your kitchen, because I do that. I do that constantly.
Write your list. You know, it's just, you know, and I suppose it's just, you know, there's, as Becky says, it's just, you've got to, you know, don't wait for a diagnosis. You know, I think if anything helps in life, then you do it. You know, you do whatever gets you through. You know, and I think that's really important.
Own it, really own it. I say that so much to my young people. You know, shout about it, own it. You know, if you're not great at picking up on social cues, tell people. You know, I've worked with young people before where they've been open about it, you know, and they've said to their friends, look, I'm not great at reading emotions in others. You're just going to have to tell me what you're thinking and feeling.
Makes it a lot easier.
I might just miss it, you know. And actually, they were saying that they were worried their friends would judge them, but actually they didn't. They just went, oh, all right. And actually, you find that when you break through those barriers and you're open about it and open about the things that you struggle with and the things that you're good at, a lot of people actually, they're like, all right, yeah, let's move on.
That's a massive thing, isn't it? People appreciate honesty. And I appreciate your guys' honesty today. And just as we come towards the end, obviously, hopefully you've come across as not just clinicians but human people as well, guys.
Oh, I'm an alien. That's a different matter.
No, you're southern.
I'm not from York, I'm just a bit posh. I live in London.
Obviously, going back to what the channel's all about, how do you guys survive in the world? What is it like? What is a way that you manage your mental health? How do you... Who wants to go first? I'm not talking about jam. I've done that enough on too many videos.
Do you make jam?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Amazing.
We're jamming.
That was when I was really ill, so I think now my parents get a bit stressed if I start making jam again. Now, how do you manage? What if you were having a bad day, Ben? What is the thing that you go, actually?
Great question, because I've struggled with my mental health, and and I had a long period of being really low, and you know, and I seeked help, and that you know really helped me. And I suppose how I always think that one of the things that I do to help is I recognise when I'm, you know, and when I'm feeling stressed, when I'm feeling anxious, and I think once I start to recognise it and accept, oh, that's how I'm feeling, rather than try and fight against it, I think that can, for me, that really helps. And there's definitely certain stuff that I do to sort of help, you know, certain activities, you know, like I love walking my dog. I live
what's your dog called?
Casper Meatballs.
Yeah,
big up Casper. But you know, but I think in my recognizing, you know, I think that's the first thing of when I'm feeling a bit stressed, and then in that recognition, then I can start to do some things like walk my dog. I like cooking. That's one of the things. Some people find it stressful, but I, you know, find it it's a big protective factor for my mental health. So, you know, so similar to maybe your your jam making, but I suppose for me it's recognizing, not fighting it, being at peace with that, I think, and then sometimes doing stuff to sort of, to help with that, which I know is helpful. Exercising, I think, for me is helpful, but everyone has different ways in which gets you through it. It might be gaming, it might be whatever it is, and I think it's, there's that saying, isn't there, as long as it's not impacting on your physical health, that it's whatever gets you through. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think, embracing my own neurodiversity traits, I'm somebody who likes organisation and neatness and order. I always have done. So living with my husband with ADHD is quite the clash. So I often find I recognise that my mental health is much better when I can embrace that kind of neatness and organisation and order. So one of the things that I find really helpful for me is puzzling. Okay. I love puzzling. So I love like jigsaws, Lego. We're quite a big Lego family, but I love putting together Lego. And I think there's
I've got a Lego White House.
Oh, amazing!
Sick.
Nice.
But I think there's just something for me that's really therapeutic in being able to, when everything feels chaotic and out of control, to be able to just sit and do a jigsaw and piece it together in
and I couldn't think of anything more stressful, so I suppose that, I really couldn't. Like, why is this all different places? I'll do two. I can't do that, and walk off. So I suppose it's whatever gets you through, isn't it? It's, we all have different. I don't think I've even finished a game of noughts and crosses, so I'm off to do something else. It's, I'm sure this will out. Either you'll win, I'll win. So I suppose it's everyone has those different ways. Because I would hate to do a jigsaw. I've never completed one ever. I never will, and that's cool. So I do other stuff.
And if people do want to learn a little bit more about how other people manage, there is our podcast which is called Chat Chit. Yes, you heard that right, Chat Chit. And so I'll link that in the bios as well. I just want to say thank you very much, guys, for coming on the podcast. It's not a podcast, it's a video. It's video. But I really appreciate it. You will get the edit, so you can check it. And I'm just now going to go check, and hopefully it's still recording.
Great podcast.
Yeah.
Video.
Right, let's see. Hope you found some value in that, whatever we've just dribbled on about for the last 45 minutes or whatever. But ultimately, like I said, it's all about finding you the support. So that's why the link is below. You can go click on it, or you might have the other videos flying around at some point here. But as the thing that YouTubers, people say, like, share and subscribe. But ultimately, pass it on to a friend, pass it on to a family member, pass it on to someone that you might know that's struggling, because ultimately we're out here just trying to help other people, and we're not trying to sell you anything, we're not trying to get anything out of it other than bettering mental health for young people and the people that support them. So if you can do that, then great. Thanks, guys.